Namaskara. Good evening to everybody. The Kuempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara had organized a one-day webinar on Dr. Siddhalingaya recently, a few months ago. As you all know, this is a series mainly for the non-Kannadigas. Therefore, today we have a talk on Dr. Siddhalingaya in English. All of us know we lost Dr. Siddhalingaya in June 2021. He was a poet, a dramatist, a Kannada professor, a member of Legislative Council of Karnataka. He became the member in a very young age, at about 34, I think. He was also the chairman of Kannada Development Authority for a term. More than that, he was a Dalit activist. He was a public intellectual. He was respected by the uh, both by the academicians as well as the general public. With his bold writing, starting from 1975, uh, the Dalit Bandaya movement in Kannada literature gained momentum. His anthology, Olemadigara Hadu, which came in 1975, and later on, Saviraru Nadigalu, another anthology, also uh, became very famous in Kannada. Again, uh, both in the academic circle as well as general public, general readers, and some of the poems of those anthologies uh, were used for sloganeering also. Such was his, effect and impact on the Dalit movement. Being an Ambedkarite, Dr. Siddhalingaya was one of the leaders who brought a feeling of self-respect to the downtrodden. His style of writing is unique, especially his prose, filled with humor, may make us laugh. But at the same time, it will also open our eyes, it will wet our eyes, it will throw light on facts of life, the sufferings of Dalits, and the atrocities experienced by the Dalits and other downtrodden. Uh, as we all know, Siddhalingaya's speeches assembly are also published. Urukeri is a unique autobiography. Uh, his autobiography is also available in English. Recently, the government of India honored him with the posthumous Padma Shri Award. He, he was awarded with the other prestigious awards like Pampa Prashasti in Karnataka. Nadoja is another honor he had received. Today we have with us Professor Vishnumurthy Prabhu to talk about Siddhalingaya's literature, and particularly, I think he'll talk on Uru Keri, the autobiography. Uru Keri came in three series, a series of three volumes, I think, of course, with some 4 5 years of intervals. Professor Vishnumurthy Prabhu is an associate professor, Department of English in Government First Grade College, Hempi, near Udupi. He got his MA degree from Mangalore University. He has also a postgraduate diploma in industrial relations and personnel management. He served two three institutions like Purna Prajna College Udupi, Srinivas Institute of Management Mangalore, and Dr. G. Shankar Government College for Women in Udupi. He has a experience of more than 20 years of teaching experience. He has presented papers in international conferences. He has given many invited talks at various educational and other institutions. Uh, he especially he is specialized in the analysis of colonial experience in literature. Uh, he has published many articles in several journals, including Text Matters, an international journal published from Poland. Uh, Apart from his literary activities, he is also a known artist. As a theater artist, he has acted in several plays, staged in places across the country. He also acted in Kannada cinema Alegalu, screened in many international film festivals. Uh, he also composed lyrics to award-winning Kannada cinema Railway Children. So we have a really resource person with us today. Uh, I welcome Professor Vishnumurthy Prabhu to talk on Dr. Siddhalingaya. I also welcome all the viewers to this program. I also welcome the members of the Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara and Registrar Ishwar Mirji and all the well-wishers of Pradhikara. I also request the viewers to share the links, Facebook link and the YouTube link with your friends, relatives, and with all the groups you are acquainted with. Once again, I welcome you all, and I request Professor Vishnumurthy to give his talk. Professor Vishnumurthy.
Uh, Good evening, sir. Good evening, all. At the outset, let me thank Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati for giving me this opportunity. I thank Dr. Girish Bhatt Ajakala in particular. And in this particular lecture, I wish to speak on Uru Keri, the autobiography of Dr. Siddhalingaya, one of the prominent Kannada poets. The English translation of Siddhalingaya's autobiography by S. R. Ramakrishna is available by the title A Word with You World. A Word with You World. Now, this work is very important for the reason that it evocatively presents the Dalit experience and struggles in the last quarter of the 20th century. It also pronounces the stance of Siddhalingaya the poet, how Siddhalingaya evolved as a poet and, more importantly, as an activist. It also, in a way, shows that Siddhalingaya the poet, activist, has a multifaceted personality, which I'm going to deal with in the brief lecture. More importantly, I would also like to draw the attention of all of you towards the style of autobiography. And in one of the interviews that Siddhalingaya has given, he speaks about his autobiography as an extended version of his poetry. His autobiography is an extended work of poetry. And he also says that the genre of autobiography, rather than being just a bundle of facts, should involve interesting facts, should contain interesting episodes, and also mystery. Now, this in a way makes up for Siddhalingaya having not written maybe a fictional work of art. I would like to tell that this particular work has reminded me of Things Fall Apart. Now, in Things Fall Apart, the African experience shows us that it is such a culture where the divine mix with the divine intervene in the life of ordinary people. Maybe in the course of lecture, I would like to draw certain episodes, I would like to give certain examples from this particular autobiography where we see that the experience is also clustered with fantastic. And before I begin with the introduction of Siddhalingaya or the autobiography, and I would like to thank Dr. Ajakala Girish Bhatt for the generous introduction that he has given to me and the poet Siddhalingaya as well. So I will not speak the details that he has already given in his introduction of Siddhalingaya. So I would like to locate this particular autobiography in the broader context of the late 20th century. Now, throughout the 20th century and even before that in the 19th century, we see that Dalits even now have a struggle with the mainstream. And we have to say that the social reform movements of the 19th century, but for the great personalities of M.K. Gandhi and Jyoti Phule, they have failed to include the Dalits in the mainstream, or they have failed to include the Dalits in their fold. And the protests, the coming together of the expression of solidarity of all the other non-Brahmin classes against the dominant upper classes took place in India even before the independence in the first decade of the 20th century. But still, these non-Brahminic movements, they failed to bring along with them the Dalits. So a large number of population, say around 15% of the population, had to live in a very bad condition. They had to experience humiliation. They had to experience an unequal treatment at every walk of life. Okay, after the independence, we had a constitution that guaranteed the rights for all. It spoke about an equal society, that we gave to ourselves. But as we all know, by the 70s, we have reached a stage where this idealism had fallen apart, where we had come to know that the idealistic notions of the people who had fought for the independence realized that we have not achieved the true freedom. And there was a prominent middle class, English educated middle class, which was coming into the fore. And at the same time, our local culture, or to say even precisely, that the people who had, just sacrificed their education for the sake of, nationalistic struggle, realized that it was not the kind of state, it was not the kind of country that they wished for. And against this backdrop of desperation, against this larger unhappiness about the state of affairs, we place our Kannada literary tradition, where Dalit movement had given a totally new energy, a kind of new ethos to to a literature which was till then was hanging on to the idealistic notion of the Navodaya, or the modernist jargon of the Navya. So many critics acknowledge that Dalit movement has given a new force, a new direction to Kannada poetry, mainly because of the freedom of expression and freedom of a totally new poetic language, totally new poetic jargon that it had used. So, with this, I would like to draw your attention to Siddhalingaya's Uru Keri. Now, let us look at this title, Uru Keri. And Uru refers to the village settlement of the upper caste people, and Keri refers to the outskirts of the Uru. Keri is the ghettoized, or rather to say that it's a colony of the untouchables, the Dalits, and Siddhalingaya aptly, titled his autobiography Uru Keri. And there is a dichotomy here. I would like to draw your attention to this dichotomy that the village includes Keri in it. Keri is a part of the village, whereas the people of this Keri are kept at bay. The village needs the services of these people, but looks at these people as a sort of curse. Now, this is the dichotomy I see in this particular title, and I would like to draw your attention, especially the audiences here, non-Kannadigas, to the poetry of Langston Hughes, in which he says that in the poem Harlem, he says that yes, Harlem has given me this experience, and there is a relationship between Harlem and New York. New York being the white settlement, New York being the sophisticated place. And he says, I hear you, New York. I hear you. And he poses the question back, do you hear me? Now, this is the question that surfaces in Siddhalingaya's Uru Keri. Does the Uru listen to the Keri? And I would like to, in my course of lecture, I would like to take up 3 or 4 themes, key themes that are general to all Dalit autobiographies. But having said that, I would like to say that the treatment that Siddhalingaya gives to these themes, these motifs, is totally different. And let us take up the theme of education. Now, we know that traditionally for the Dalits, going to schools is not an accustomed practice. And when Siddhalingaya's father, Devanna, feels that the son is going astray, and Siddhalingaya's uncle also, in a way forces him, then he is taken to the school, and this is a very important milestone in his life. Why do I say this? Now, I am giving this lecture, on the platform of Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati. I would like to draw your attention to the great poet of Kannada, poet laureate Kuvempu, Kuppalli Venkatappa Puttappa, who had once said, but for this education, I would have been doing some menial labor in some rich man's house. Now, this is a very important factor. Yes, sir, Vijay Shankar, one of the leading critics of Kannada, gives a very interesting example in his introduction to Dalit literature. He compares a Brahmin and a Dalit boy, both his classmates, who had struggled a great deal to get their education. And uh, this Brahmin boy was also, he also comes from a very poor background, struggles hard to, get his education. But in the same class, there is also a Dalit boy who struggles hard to get his education. And he says, at the end, both of them get education, but there is a difference. The difference is in the very fact that a Dalit boy gets educated and he becomes a model. He becomes a role model to many such. Ambedkar is such a force that acts behind the uh, initiatives, the activism of Siddhalingaya. And Siddhalingaya, being a very talented boy right from the beginning, makes use of his talent in mimicking the school inspector. And in one of his interviews, he agrees or he reveals that he had got this talent from his mother. And the great force behind Siddhalingaya getting this education is his mother, who wanted him to be educated. And the family of Dyavanna later on moves to Bangalore from Manchenahalli. That was the village that they had Siddhalingaya had spent his early childhood. So the family moves to Bangalore looking for some jobs, and Javanna there does some odd jobs. But the crucial experiences in the formative years, in the childhood of Siddhalingaya, haunts him throughout his life. These are the experiences of poverty. These are the experiences of humiliation. These are the experiences of an unequal society. But the style in which Siddhalingaya narrates these incidences is very important. He maintains emotional distance. It's a matter of fact narration, telling people, see, this is the case. This is the case in Urukeri. It is as if things happen to him. It is as if things happen to him. This is the other reason why I say that Siddhalingaya's autobiography it reads more like a fiction. It reads more like a fiction. So, having said this, I would like to take you through certain themes. And the first one is hunger, one of the dominant motives that keep surfacing throughout the autobiography is the motive of hunger. I would like to give you two, three examples from the text. Siddhalingaya's family could hardly make do, and one of the ways in which they can evade this hunger was through the gestures of uh, the rich households who lend them, who give away the leftover food. And on one such occasion, Javanna, his father, takes Siddhalingaya along with him to an Orthodox Brahmin household. And Siddhalingaya narrates, I quote, stood in front of his house. He gave us the chitranna and puri left over from the previous night. I had never tasted these delicacies before. Now, this is the hunger that we see among the Dalits. Later on, Venkatamma, that is Siddhalingaya's mother, served as a sweeper in a hostel. in Sri Rampura. And here also she used to bring home the leftover from the hostel, and that solved the family's problem of hunger to some extent. And we also see that later on, Siddhalingaya joins the very hostel where his mother works as a sweeper. And in the initial years, he also feels a little embarrassed. I would like to come to that theme later on. On one other occasion, there were rumors that dacoits were troubling the people. And Siddhalingaya, being a very small boy, he sees a suspicious looking person who was looking for something in a garbage pit. And these children were worried, and they go and report to Siddhalingaya's mother. And Siddhalingaya's mother tells the kids that that man, in fact, was a relative of theirs, and he was looking for the leftover food. He was looking for the bones in the garbage pit. Now, these are the experiences that trouble Siddhalingaya, and that also, mark the Dalit identity, that we are separate, or he doesn't understand at the beginning why this happens to us. I would like to give one more example from the text. Siddhalingaya gets admission to Dalit hostel. It is a non-vegetarian, the food served there is non-vegetarian, and he feels very happy. And Siddhalingaya would pretend, when food is served, he would pretend that he is engrossed in some kind of thought. He is preoccupied with something, and he doesn't look at the plate as the person serves the food. He would feel that he is not aware of the plateful of meals that is being served to him, and at the same time, he feels very happy. And he goes home after 2 weeks. He goes home, and now the people at home feel very happy that Siddhalingaya has put on weight. Now, can we see this kind of experiences in any other sort of narratives than the Dalit autobiographies? There is another incident where a buffalo from the other village, comes to this village, Manchenahalli, and Manchinabele, and a group of few youngsters catch hold of the buffalo, kill it, and they make a feast. And the blood of the buffalo is spilled over the rocks. Next day, probably the owner of the buffalo, a farmer from the other village, comes to this village looking for the buffalo. And Siddhalingaya's uncle realizes the danger and suddenly concocts a tale. And he says, "You shouldn't have come in this bad time. The whole village is afflicted with some disease. People are sick here, and every day 2, 3 people die of diarrhea," he says. And the person who had come from the other village runs for his life. Now, these are the experiences, which trouble us as readers. As we read, these experiences trouble us a lot. But then there is a kind of non-judgmental kind of treatment. Siddhalingaya merely narrates these events, these episodes, without getting carried away emotionally. Now, this is the other important aspect which I had spoken about earlier. This is the other important aspect, this distance of the writing self from the narrated from the object of the book, that is his own life. So this distance marks this particular autobiography. This also lends the humor, dark humor that we see in this autobiography. The other important theme that I would like to draw your attention to is the discrimination and humiliation. At a very early age, Siddhalingaya experiences this as the character of Baka in the novel Untouchable by Mulkraj Anand. There is a similar experience here. One day, his grandmother was taking him uh, to a wedding, and unfortunately, as Siddhalinga was walking, unfortunately, his hand brushed against the clothes of an upper caste man. The man gets so outraged with anger, and he was about to beat uh, Siddhalingaya. And at that time, his grandmother, intervenes, begs him, and tries to calm down this upper caste man. And as a penance, she also tells him that whenever he meets an upper caste man, he should say, Namaskara Swami. And Siddhalingaya, follows this. Now, these are the experiences that uh, make him strong. I would like to narrate a very, very humiliating experience for Siddhalingaya at a very tender age of 4 or 5. These kids, Siddhalingaya, along with the other kids in the colony, were playing before their house, and as they were playing, they also noticed from a very far away, they noticed that um, there is a man plowing the fields. But there is something very interesting. I would like to, draw your attention to this particular um, piece of narration where a man has fastened to a yoke two other people. He has fastened the yoke on the shoulders of two people and was plowing the Ainuros fields. And there was a third man who was following them with whipping the two men who were, carrying the yoke and walking the fields as buffaloes. In the place of buffaloes, there were two people plowing the fields. And at the very beginning, this is, this interests the kids. He says a strange, later on he realizes that it is his father. One of them is his father. And then he says, a strange agony gripped me the moment I realized that one of the men was my father. And some passerby women, they see Siddhalingaya and they pity his plight, or his father's plight rather, and they say, what a plight has befallen our Dyavana. And this also doubles the agony that Siddhalingaya faced. There are many incidences where um, Dyavana, Siddhalingaya's father, was beaten up by people for not paying the debts. Now, these are the incidences, that keep haunting Siddhalingaya. He mentions this, in many of his interviews. Here is also a question of, truth claims in autobiographies. Even when dealing with, even when narrating such perturbing experiences, Siddhalingaya would maintain, if I could call it an aesthetic distance, he would maintain, a distance from what is being narrated. And um, I think this is very important when we speak about truth claims in autobiographies. In one of his interviews later on, Siddhalingaya said this. Yes, I had a doubt because his autobiography was written when he was in his middle ages. Uh, the first volume came out in 1996, the second in 2006, and the third one in 2018. It was an experience narrated after so many years. Was it true? And if it was true, to what an extent it was true? And Siddhalingaya says, fortunately, he could approach his father and ask for the veracity of whatever he has written. And Siddhalingaya did that. He went and approached his father, and his father said that, of course, yes, he was, used as, buffalo. He and the other person was used as buffaloes on many instances. Siddhalingaya tried to probe him why such a need arose. What was the need to use these men as buffaloes? For which his father doesn't give him a very convincing answer, he would say. So these episodes mark the realization on his part that uh, this society is so unequal and he needs to fight. Maybe this very early marks of Dalit identity he receives through the education that he gets, through the reading that he has. Lingaya was a voracious reader, and um, he was also a good speaker. He won uh, many prizes in debates. He won the cups, and later on, he sold these cups to buy books. There are a number of incidents where Siddhalingaya, speaks about his life very openly, and he also speaks very openly about the people around him. I am not going to deal with in detail about these things for the want of time, but I would like to stress that it is in his school days, that in his college days, that um, he had this influence of Periyar, Ramaswamy Naik, and others. Fortunately for Siddhalingaya, he had a wonderful bunch of teachers about whom he also makes a reference. Sashi Marulaya and GSS, Kiram Nagaraj, uh, and many others. And it was in his uh, postgraduate days when uh, these people, these teachers and others join together and they bring out the first volume of poetry, Hulema Digara Hadu, or the poetry of the subjugated, the poetry of the Holayas and Madigas, which became so popular that he would say that 1,000 copies were sold uh, in a week or so, and then they had to reprint the books. And Siddhalingaya becomes popular. There is one incident that I would like to trace here, that is of uh, his participation in Poets Meet, which is organized by a famous rationalist called Nasimhaya. And In this particular poets meet, there were many, great poets. Siddhalingaya was a novice by that time, and in the pamphlet, in the invitation of this, poets meet, the other poets were introduced as the great poets of Kannada, or the popular poets of Kannada. But when it came to Siddhalingaya, before his name, there was this brief introduction that he is a Dalit poet. And Siddhalingaya, when he started reciting his poems, he also mentioned about this, that it is unfair on the part of the organizers to call him a Dalit poet. At least they should have called him Dalit popular poet. Now, this is a kind of, you know, we may say that this also shows the self-respect that Siddhalingaya had at that age. Now, there were many influences, as I have already mentioned, the influence of Ambedkar, Periyar Ramaswamy Naik, and others. This brings to fore the Dalit identity, and as we know that, as famously, you know, put forward by Arjun Dangle, this term Dalit is not a caste. This is a kind of realization, this is kind of awakening, this is also a political category. And this activism on the part of Siddhalingaya as a uh, founder of a society called Vicharavadi Parishad, he visited all the Dalit hostels around Bangalore, and he makes a report about the sad plight of these hostels, and he gives this report to the then Chief Minister of Karnataka, Sri Devraj Aras, and who promised that improvements would be made in these Dalit hostels. And it is at this time that Siddhalingaya was also known as an orator, and he was sought after as an orator that brings him into the thick of political action during the famous Busa incident of the 70s. I would like to draw your attention to this particular episode when a very progressive minister, B. Basavalingappa in Devraj Aras government, who used to give calls to the Dalits to throw away the photos of gods into gutter, uh, who also gave calls to Dalits to protest against the discrimination that they were undergoing. He also gave calls to intercaste marriages, etc. This Basavalingappa, in one of his uh, speeches, would remark that a great deal of Kannada literature written at that time was Busa. Busa in Kannada refers to cattle field. Um, I would not like to get into the complications of dealing with whether or qualifying these remarks of Siddhalingaya, but for reasons not just related to this remark, but rather Basavalingappa's stance, pro-Dalit stance maybe, and other progressive reasons, there were statewide protests against him. And at that time, B. Basavalingappa also sought, Siddhalingaya's support in rallying the students in support of uh, B. Basolingappa, and Siddhalingaya gave many speeches in which he spoke about this. So these are the incidences that he speaks in the early part of his autobiographies, and in the later parts, he also speaks about his experiences as an MLC, member of Legislative Council, where Siddhalingaya could contribute a great deal and support the cause of equality. But whenever people came to him for unworthy favors, Siddhalingaya would feel that uh, he is not the MLC, but rather he is just a peon, he is just an attendant in the office. And if one or two, get doubt him, he would rather twist his face, or he would twist his lips and acts in a weird way, so that the people would believe him to be an attendant and just leave him. Now, I would like to, draw your attention to the detail that I gave you about this particular talent of Siddhalingaya, as an artist who used to mimic his school inspectors and teachers. I would like to, before winding up, I would like to, speak about one important aspect of how difficult it is to uh, carry forward with this inhuman treatment of untouchability. And we know that for all the practical purposes, however traditionalist you are, you cannot follow this inhuman practice in modern times. And Siddhalingaya would narrate this particular, truth in a very interesting way, that he would write in his autobiography, quoting one of his teachers, G. Ramakrishna. He says, let us imagine you are a very orthodox person and you are moving from, Sri Rampur to Basavangudi or wherever, and you take up, you board a bus, and people show you, people, touch you, and your purity is lost, and you go home and you want to purify yourselves, you want to take a bath, and the soap that you use comes from a factory where there is a reservation for these people, where the people who wrap your soaps are untouchables. Now, how would you follow this, uh, you know, uh, purity? What is the notion of purity? Now, these are the questions that um, he would draw, he would ask. And as I have already told you, that one of the important aspects of his autobiography is that it is an extension of the questions raised in his poems. Uh, you know, uh, I would like to quote some of the lines from his poem, My People, because these are the people who work for your luxury. You speak about your purity. You have all the sophisticated lifestyle. You have all the luxuries, but at what cost? Your luxuries are provided for by the hard labor of uh, the Dalits. And this is the other aspect which makes us question, um, this uh, practice of untouchability. I quote Siddhalingaya from his poem, My People, who die of starvation, who are kicked till they faint, who cringe before others, reaching out to hands and feet, who keep their hands folded, devotees of those above them. These are my people who plow, who sow and harvest, sweating in the sun, who take rest sighing heavily with fatigue, who go about empty handed, getting little to eat or wear. These are my people who carry dressed stone, raised roofs, and built bungalows, and get crushed for their pains under the debris, who, fallen by the wayside, voiceless, weep within themselves. These, these are my people who treated fiery speeches are scorched and burned to ashes, who, for those who feast on sweets with God's name and their lips, stitch sandals and shoes, these victims of usurers, these are my people who excavate gold but who go without food, who weave fine fabrics but go themselves bare, who do what they are told, who subsist on mere air, who do what they are told, and who subsist on mere air. These, these are my people. I would also like to quote just a couple of lines from his other poem, Thousands of Rivers. But yesterday they came like a mountain, my people, they arrived in hordes, my men. Yesterday, black faces, the bearded with silver burning eyes, red with rage, burst through the blankets of sleep, breaking the barriers of day, breaching the bounds of night. These are, you know, the people that Siddhalingaya speaks about, and these remind me of Langston Hughes again. That particular poem, Negro, speaks of river, where he says, Langston Hughes says, "Yes, I have known rivers, rivers ancient than humanity, and these are the people who toiled, and on their toil we have the civilizations. This ugly side of our civilization, we hide these atrocities, we hide this unequal society, and we claim to be a nation of gurus. Unfortunately, we have left out a huge population outside the folds of this religion. These people did not have entrance into the temple. I would like to draw your attention to Sharan Kumar Limbale's story, where for entering a temple, a Dalit is killed, and that particular night there is torrential rains, and uh, the wall of the temple falls down, and the next day the people would say that the Dalit had fallen under this wall and and succumbed to this accident. Now we hide these ugly phases of our life, and we speak about our GDP and other things. We speak about our, uh, defense expenses. We increase our, you know, budget for the defense, or for the protection of the country, and the real protection of the country, I believe, is in the good treatment, or bringing out a very just society. With these few remarks, uh, I would like to end my presentation with a brief story from Siddhalingaya's autobiography, where he says, "Our God is a Palaya God. But the guru who comes to their village was from a slightly upper caste. So that's why he didn't get into our household. Yet we are happy that he had come up to the house, up to the mulberry tree. We were happy on that day. We are happy that whole day because we also now feel that there is a guru to bless us. Now, this is the kind of satisfaction that he finds at that age. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vishnumurthy.
Thank you, sir.
Very insightful and informative lecture on Dr. Siddhalingaya as well as Uru Keri, the autobiography. I thank Professor Vishnumurthy Prabhu for giving us a nice lecture. I also thank all the viewers and the members of Pradhikara and all. One information is that tomorrow we will have a talk by Dr. S.G. Vaidya, a famous translator, well-known writer. S.G. Vaidya will talk tomorrow. Tomorrow he'll talk on V.K. Gokak, Jnanapita awardee V.K. Gokak. So I welcome all of you and look forward to your cooperation tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please join us with the Facebook links, Facebook and YouTube links. Thank you, one and all.